ladies and gentlemen, I am Vitold and I'll tell you what it's like to ride this Aprilia Tuareg 660 and whether I believe it's worth buying or not. This motorcycle is a very unique thing in the middleweight adventure class for a good reason that many of you I think should or could or may care about. Well, it's a no bullcrap motorcycle while all others are. So yes, this is a truly one-of-a-kind thing, and renting it, I had no idea that it would turn out to be that way. It's one of those more off-road oriented motorcycles, judging by their looks. Alongside, I used to put there a Yamaha Tenere 700 Ducati Desert X, and also used to add a Husqvarna Nord 901, which turned out to be more of a touring bike. With a weird thing about the Tenere explained in my full honest review, that's another video. Look at that 21-inch front rim, long suspension travel, narrow seat, and a general design. It looks like it could ride through a desert. And it might just be able to do that just as it is. But the question remains, what would the experience be like? Still, most of us ride on pavement at least most of the time. If you buy a Jeep Wrangler or a Mercedes G-Class, do you buy it because of the need for its off-road capabilities or more because of its style? I've got an SUV myself, and definitely not because of its off-road capabilities, but for other reasons, only including a feeling of it being more capable also in the rougher places, and I'm fine with that. The same goes on here with the segment, but there is one thing that makes Aprilia Tuareg 660 stand out in the crowd. And let me go through with my perspective after riding all of its competitors. Tuareg doesn't look intimidating. You can easily jump onto its seat as it's at 86 centimeters. It is narrow, and so I can flat-foot it on both sides at the same time, being 1 meter 83 centimeters tall or 6 feet tall. It is all under control, and only that handlebar looks scary as it is so wide. But once you grab it, you realize that it's more of a visual thing that the narrow seat and the whole body of Tuareg enhance. There is one more thing that you notice then, and it's that the bars are unusually high. No other motorcycle in this segment has its handlebar installed so high. So at first I thought that it was going to be a tough time with this bike. So wrong. It is an answer to Yamaha's Tenere 700, which I reviewed for you recently. I will also make a head-to-head comparison. So the handlebar is high, and what this does on the road is that it lets you hold it sort of freely with no pressure on your wrists, as it's not too far forward. There's also not too much bent back, so you've got a lot of control. It does have some serious width, which helps maneuver easily at lower speeds and also at higher speeds. It lets you turn more decisively and also quicker, as it's easier to pull and push at the same time a wider handlebar than a narrow one. The seat is not the most comfortable thing on earth, but just look at it. It doesn't seem to have been designed with comfort in mind as a priority, and considering the general purpose of the bike, let's say that this is understandable. It is narrow, so in all circumstances it is, and it really is, easier to reach the ground and to support ourselves. It's not adjustable in terms of height. It is rather on the harder side, but not as hard as some competitors. My one real issue with it is that there is this lowest point of it, and then in the direction of the handlebar it overlaps the fuel tank, but it angles up pretty quickly, pretty rapidly, which doesn't leave much of a flat spot, so you may be crushing some of your stuff sitting there. That's a downside. And you cannot move back, as you will just keep sliding forward anyways, so there's no point trying. I like the upright position and that wide handlebar. It really does the job well. It's a nice package together overall. Foot pegs aren't the lowest here, so the knee angle is not the most comfortable, but it's definitely not cramped for me, so that's good. And there is a reason for this specific setup in this specific bike, and you'll like that. Once you start moving with the Tuareg, first of all, it's pretty composed and it lets you do what you want to do with it and doesn't resist you. It feels very neutral in reacting to leaning left and to leaning right at low speeds. It's not like it's mind controlled yet, but it makes you interested, and it follows for some time until you reach a little bit higher than crawling speeds and you discover that this bloody thing is an absolute masterpiece. How have Italians done it? I've got no idea, especially that nothing makes sense with this bike. It is tall, it has a big, tall front wheel, it must have a high center of gravity, even though the fuel tank is actually lower than it seems. There is long travel suspension that should give very little feel on the road, but instead this thing turns like a dream. I am stunned, as this is, watch this is the best handling motorcycle in the entire mid-size adventure segment. And I mean on paved roads. I'm not talking about off-roading yet at all. This is crazy. So first of all, it's very quick to change directions at speeds, including high speeds, so like above 80 or 100 kilometers per hour. It follows until you want it to stop, and then it stays the way you want it as well, but you can tighten the turn or you can go wider. You feel that you've got full control over it. It's really great. Using a brake or accelerating doesn't cause any nervous behavior, and the bike stays pointed exactly where you wanted it and where you had it. On the roundabout, you can keep exactly the line that you want at very low speeds. On a bike that's got 24 centimeters of front and rear suspension travel and 24 centimeters of ground clearance, man, how is that not insane? It's got like 50-50 on-road and off-road tires in the form of Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR that give enough control to give you a lot of confidence on the roads. And I was complaining about those tires on Husqvarna Northern 901 where they didn't have much grip, and then I was considering whether the tires could have been the reason of me not feeling confident enough on the bike. Here there was no such thing, so my conclusion is that these tires are not the reason of the lack of confidence on the Northern. They do not have much grip, but this bike is less powerful, so it's not that big of an issue. Yeah, they can slip here and there as well when exiting corners in less grippy places, but then I scrapped one of the foot pegs on an off-road looking motorcycle. And I would have gone further since the bike was like, yeah, come on, no worries, mate, just keep going. Unbelievable. And it's a pure pleasure to ride this bike in the corners. The only thing I noticed was a tiny bit of a wobble when accelerating hard at speeds and doing something with the handlebar, like turning. And my guess is that it can be because of that squatting rear end that makes the front suspension more loose and so behaving this way. Yeah, you add throttle, the bike goes like an old Mercedes. But it's a marginal thing, and a wide handlebar helps to overcome that wobble easily. So give it street tires and you're getting yourself a super fun super moto that's extremely enjoyable to turn from a corner to a corner. The rear rim is 18 inches and both tires are tubeless. So a win here. Keep in mind some other competitors. Even though also at high speeds it turns very well and stays absolutely neutral without fighting like most others in the whole segment, including the big adventure bikes. Reaching those speeds is a challenge for this two-cylinder inline engine. There's 80 horsepower and 70 newton-meters of torque coming from this 659 cubic centimeter engine that look fine on paper, but in real life, this bike weighing only around 204 kilograms with all fluids, including fuel, it doesn't have much juice in it. If you want a supermoto type of crazy fun, you won't find it here, as the engine really feels like it's an old dog trying to bark. Shaking the foot pegs at the same time a lot, making some noise and being determined, but just physically not being able to keep up. Yep, it is a weak point, as having all that encouragement from handling, I would be getting excited only to then watch the powertrain feeling like it's about to explode. I would rev it till the end, till a rev limiter would actually kick in with a total cut of power, which I don't like. I would have to switch to the next gear to keep going, but I would keep going slower and slower. Of course, with every gear, that's how it is, but here it's like, oh, come on, it was supposed to be there. Because there's this initial pull when you open the throttle, and right after that, it loses all that fire. It just goes strange, and it really makes me want to cry, as I'm so impressed with handling of Tuareg. All this won't bother riders who just don't buy a rally-capable looking motorcycle to race others, at least not all the time. If you are looking for a motorcycle that you will be able to ride in the city and take for a spin right outside of it on some gravel roads, I'm pretty certain it will be fine. If you're going to take it to another country for an off-road trip but need to get there using highways, it might hurt. It will not be exciting getting there, definitely. Traveling from a city to a city also won't, I think, be a pleasure, and on this Aprilia I had to plan overtaking at speeds, which is not much fun, and it makes me remember times or being allowed to ride only a 125cc motorcycles before getting my full motorcycle license centuries ago. Almost humiliating feeling. Anyhow, riding around the cities will be fine. Going on trips, having to remember that, okay, I'll have to start accelerating earlier so that I overtake this car, and God forbid the car starts accelerating at the same time or before, because then I won't do it. That's this type of feeling. Anyway, you may also notice what I said before, that the bike's rear end squats when you open the throttle, or rather you will notice it every single time, as it's very, very visible, and it adds on to that feeling of the bike working really, really hard. If you open the throttle at lower RPM but in higher gears, it does pretty okay with no shaking or choking, and starts steadily going quicker. I noticed some heat very low near my lower legs in the engine's area, but not crazy much, so I would say it should be manageable. I'm not sure if the transmission with rather long gears is helping the whole engine. In one place it's helpful, but in terms of performance, no, it's not. Remembering a Tenere 700, which has less power, similar weight, and that bike, well, maybe because of the lack of traction control at all, but that bike would be able to pull wheelies. Here, no way, and not because of the tire speed, definitely. So longer gearing would be helpful because the gear lever works very hard and has long travel, so those long gears make you not need to change them so often, so you don't have to deal with that gear lever so often, so that's a plus. A little bit kind of indirect advantage, but yeah, let's keep it there. The gear lever is pretty high in relation to the foot pegs, so switching to higher gears may be sometimes challenging. Going down requires that you lift a foot off the peg and just smash it from the top. My bike didn't have a quick shifter. While it is available as an accessory, and I would recommend getting it. So yeah, the transmission doesn't receive the highest score from me, especially that engaging neutral is also pretty demanding. The windshield is more of a dash cover, as that's all it covers, and you shouldn't expect solid wind protection from it. Thankfully, there aren't any turbulences, which is a plus here. I would try, I think, first with the deflector, as this can have some adjustment, at least the angle adjustment, that the bike's shield doesn't have at all. I'm not sure why, as it's also not the cheapest motorcycle and it does have some useful tech. The digital dashboard is rather clean and it greets you with that hashtag be a racer, which is fun, I think. I like those kinds of things. Fuel gauge is not very precise, as it shows only 4 bars, so I would say that's an average amount of help. There is ABS, even though not cornering, but a simple one. There is traction control, the riding modes including off-road, that is actually super easy to use, as it activates instantly using just one dedicated button on the right side of the handlebar. You can switch through all of them. This is really well thought out by Aprilia, and I'm glad that they lead by example here. One press and ABS in the rear is off in this mode, and traction control also lets you play more. Yamaha Tenere 700 doesn't even have traction control available, which is a shame. It's like selling a phone with no screen but just buttons, or an office chair with no adjustment. Speaking of chairs, what I'm sitting on right now is an electric office chair that uses a BMW 7 Series luxury car seat as a base. So I've got here an 18-way electric adjustment and lots of other unusual stuff. Check them out at powerseats.eu. I'm also involved with this brand and I'm loving it. There's another one in beige right there. Aprilia Tuareg has also an LED front light and cruise control. A manually adjustable front and rear suspension is there. I tried to make the rear softer, but haven't felt that much of a difference there. There's this interesting thing about some of those motorcycles that look like they want to be considered proper off-road machines, that their long travel suspension doesn't give much benefits on the road, as manufacturers tend to make them harder, or maybe they even have to make them harder in order for them to maintain a certain level of stability and composure. And I don't agree with that. Make them soft and only in the end make them hard, because now in Africa Twin 1100 or Yamaha Tenere 700 that are similarly working to this one, there is long travel, but it's so hard and it's so painful that it's just terrible to ride in any conditions. They feel soft in the first 5% of their range, which is useless in fact, and then this Aprilia Tuareg does it differently here, and I would say that it's softer up to 10 to 15% of the full range, And now this allows it to glide over small bumps and potholes, and for example, specifically those gaps that connect different parts of the road or on a bridge. Riding over that feels like there isn't anything, and it's just a great feeling. But then riding over more demanding stuff, a little bit bigger bumps or bigger potholes, Tuareg will bite and kick your spine to show who's your daddy. And I don't necessarily like that, as it's simply uncomfortable. But there's one more thing that I feel should be mentioned here. Because when I took it for a ride off the road and rode on a bumpy gravel road, front suspension would feel like bottoming out with every single bump. The rear would deal with them better, but I would still prefer to stand up, which is sort of the point. But I would like to be able to also sit and ride this way if I prefer to. If I have to ride for 50 kilometers like that in some remote place, which some of you guys claim is one of the reasons for buying those bikes, and I accept that. So talking about standing, here we've got the number one unusual thing that no other motorcycle can offer you today in this and the higher segment. It's that if you are around my height, you can actually stand on the foot pegs and ride this way for as long as you want while being comfortable. And here comes an explanation of why that handlebar is so tall. This is the main reason, so that we wouldn't have to bend down like crazy or to squat like squatters to reach the handlebar when standing. Forget about any competitors, I've tried. So, ladies and gentlemen, Aprilia with its Tuareg is the only manufacturer that offers a truly off-road capable motorcycle that you can ride straight from the factory and comfortably stand on its foot pegs when doing off-road riding. Who would have thought that it would be Italian Aprilia that would deliver the promise here, like completely out of nowhere almost, if you notice that badge. Considering fairly low weight of the bike, that narrow seat allowing for easy support with both legs, tall and wide handlebar at the same time, this is a motorcycle that I would actually maybe even be eager to take off-road. Moving to brakes, which are adequate, but I think the whole experience can be a little bit traumatic when using the front brake. It needs to be squeezed hard, so I wish there was more of that initial power there. Then it becomes rather fine. It's also easy to control there, but there isn't as much confidence or progression when squeezing more and more. When using it, the front end also dives, I think, like nothing else. Then all you can do is just straighten your arms, tighten both triceps, and close your eyes to not see that horror of a dive. The rear brake has a mature ABS, so it works fine, it's not panicking. In the end of the day, you will be able to stop if you use the front brake, but it will be painful. First, the front suspension has to do a lot of work and make you feel like you're going down while compressing itself, and then only then the bike starts to slow down, like in a proper off-road car. It is a complicated situation. I feel that I should add that this is also the first motorcycle that made me look like an 18-year-old blonde girl from TikTok at the petrol station, where it took me a while to figure out how to open its fuel cap. The key had to be turned in one specific way, but it turns sort of freely in both. You don't know which one is the proper way. And then it tightens the whole mechanism. So it led me to thinking that if the things get tight, it's not going to open because it's tight, it's sealed, it's in place. But then when it freely twists around, opening that mechanism with the key should just easily unlock it. You should be able to take it out. But no, if it's tight, you then have to twist it, and you're able to twist it. And still, a word of critique needs to be said here, as the whole cap, this thing has to be removed along with your key and put somewhere with the key inside. If you put it on something dirty or it falls, which it will at some point fall, I assure you of that, that's gonna happen no matter what, you're putting all that crap into the fuel tank. So good luck to the engine processing all that. Not to mention that you're placing drops of petrol on whatever you place it on then after removing. So a stupid idea. Fuel tank capacity is 18 liters, and yeah, obviously there is no keyless fuel cap available nor keyless access, but I wouldn't expect that. Anyway, there's no cornering function for the front light, nor there are any heated seats, but there can be a lower or higher seat installed. There can be heated grips added, center stand, crash bars, and that strangely missing here rear rack that makes moving the bike around harder if that's what you like to grab sometimes when moving it. Yeah, that is a bit weird. Riding modes can be customized, and there is one called individual, which you can modify without messing around with all the other stock riding modes. That's cool. So you're safe, and you might potentially need it, as there's a lot that you can modify, but you won't ever know what the numbers that you're seeing on the screen mean, as there is no explanation as number 1 is more of something than when it's set at 2 or 3. You'll need a manual, I'm afraid, so likely you won't probably bother. And that's Italian way, just like in a Ducati, somehow also in Suzuki for whatever reason. So perhaps not really an Italian way, sorry Italians. What's interesting in the context of Italians is design, as especially in this color trim, Tuareg looks like you can walk next to it and not notice it. To me, it doesn't look like a bike that has just been launched on the market. I myself prefer the other two color trims with red or yellow, and that's mostly because this frame around the front lamp is not silver in those, so it doesn't make it look bulkier and so weird from the front there. It looks slightly Chinese regardless of colors, but that may just be my own impression. You guys tell me what you think about the design. The seat also looks like it had 40 years of life behind it, but still there is some impression as it's a tall motorcycle, and that gives it some, let's call it a level of seriousness. I wish that the mirrors were more serious though, and not in a shape of a drop, as I truly hate that on motorcycles, as there isn't much to be seen in them, especially in those corners which are cut, the lower outside corners, damn it. So we've got ourselves an off-road capable motorcycle that handles incredibly well on the roads, but cannot run very quickly, as otherwise it gets a heart attack. It swallows very small bumps, but tries to swallow the rider on larger bumps. It has the necessary tech, including safety systems, just with ABS not being cornering, and also the front light not being cornering. There can be a quick shifter as an option and heated grips, while instead of a keyless fuel cap, you're getting a Blondie test. I'm still going to say that a completely removable fuel cap is extremely not user and motorcycle friendly. Then suspension doesn't handle accelerations and braking very well, but along with the seat, it lets you confidently reach the ground if you are my height. I'm not sure what to make out of all that, but because of that handling, I want to love this bike. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, but handling is easily a 9 out of 10, and I need you guys to know that, as making a motorcycle that's handling well requires ancient magic that not many possess, but when you experience that, that's often all you care. If that's what you want, then the best handling motorcycles alongside Tuareg are BMW R1250 GS, Moto Guzzi V85 TT, Suzuki V-Strom 800E from 20 to 80 kilometers per hour. And now, after I've told you all this, I need to add that I noticed something spilled on my left motorcycle boot after my time with this Aprilia. After searching online, it appears that this bike may have certain oil leak problems. I'm guessing that this may be my answer, and this may be what's on my boot now. What more to say than fix it, Aprilia, as you're spoiling a very good review otherwise. And by the way, during my renting motorcycles, I've only had issues with Ducatis a few times, with KTMs that were for some reason broken straight from the factory, 2 out of the 3, and then Yamaha Tracer 9, Triumph Tigers 1200. These bikes would suddenly be switching their engines off on riding. And now this leak that I'm also not a fan of. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. As always, honest review, and subscribe to see my upcoming reviews and head-to-head comparisons between motorcycles from this segment. See you there!